Welcome to episode 32 of the Half Point Per podcast. I am your host, Evan Riggs, joined once again by co-host Dalton Willie and producer Johnny Pham. We've got a packed show coming at you today, some wide receiver ranks, some quarterback ranks, some disagreements, and I think some agreements between the two of us, Dalton, that receiver rankings are very difficult to do. They have been the last couple of years, I think, but especially this year, it just seems more difficult than ever. I know you're with me on that, right?
Yeah, I probably will reshuffle them 1,000 times, and just putting them together was painful. I probably stared at my spreadsheets for two hours and did research on every guy and got nowhere with it.
Yeah, I know Chris Harris on Harris Football has a saying where he calls it the infinite sadness, where it's like wide receiver 3, and it is very true. You said right before we jumped on, you could rank a guy 34 and make the argument for him to be 16, and like either talk yourself into it or talk somebody else into it, and that is absolutely right. It's just an absolute logjam. So that's why you take running back early if you're in a redraft league. Because there's just so much value to be had at receiver with everybody going with the 3 receiver sets these days. But Johnny, going to kick it over to you. How are you on this very fine, Wednesday evening?
I am eating a California raisin and happy to be here. Very excited for the Mavs game tonight and looking forward to our dynasty draft next week.
Yeah. Dynasty draft coming up next week. I am the 2 pick. Dalton, you're 6. And then Johnny, where are you at?
I'm 5.
You're 5. Oh, so back to back. Dalton, Johnny. That'll be interesting. Anybody want to give away the insider secrets here on their draft strategy?
No, never done a dynasty draft, so we're gonna see how it goes. I need to do some mock drafts. So
yeah, I was gonna say you should hop into Sleeper and do some mock drafts in the league because they'll have the league settings already there if you have not already. At number 2, with the unpredictable J-Law at number 1 in our league, I am thinking I'm gonna have to choose between Dalvin Cook and Saquon Barkley, but I also wouldn't put it past Jacob to choose none of the above or Christian McCaffrey and have B be looking at all 3. So that'll be an interesting choice. Dalton, who would you go with out of – we'll just say Dalvin and Saquon. I think I'm leaning Saquon, but I'm torn. I'm curious your thoughts here.
I actually would probably lean Dalvin, and that's just because Saquon's future is unsure, and it just depends where he ends up. I will tell you, I was just curious. Jeff Janis is not available on the Sleeper app anymore, so I can't take him in round 23 and put him on my team, which is depressing.
Yeah, it's a real toss-up between Cook and Saquon. I think my tiebreaker is going to be Saquon's about a full year and a half younger than Dalvin. Both have injury history. Obviously, both have torn ACLs. Both have had other injuries since they've been in the NFL. So I think that's about equal, even though Dalvin is further removed from that than Saquon. But I tend to believe that Saquon is Saquon, and he will be back with the Giants as long as he is back to his old self. But yeah, it's going to be interesting and really fun to see how that turns out. Anything else on the impending dynasty draft?
It is going to be incredibly interesting to see how some of us value quarterback and tight end positions, because I've gotten into round 17 and not taken those before and seen what is left, and they are not pretty to work with.
Yeah.
I think in one draft I did, I walked out with Tua Tagovailoa and Kyle Trask, which is the worst quarterbacking I could ever hope for my fantasy team to accomplish.
I think I did a draft the other day where I just like legitimately forgot that because when it's 23 rounds, your draft board is so big that you have to scroll. So I had for some reason thought that I took a quarterback really early when I in fact hadn't. So like I was in like the 18th round. I left that draft with like Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold were my 2 quarterbacks. It was pretty bad.
Oh, no. Yeah, talk about 2 of the worst coming out of the NFC East.
All right. Well, we are on, I guess, first, Dalton, you've got, it looks like two factor fictions because Jamal Williams is from last week, right? We still have that sitting in there.
No, that's this week actually.
Oh, another Jamal Williams nugget. All right, you lead the way then.
Yeah. Anthony Lynn came out and called Jamal Williams his A-back. Fact or fiction? You know how I feel about Anthony Lynn. I saw this quote and I cried for DeAndre Swift.
You know what? I guess fact, and what I would hope is that all of this nonsense can drive DeAndre Swift's value down and make him not in Dynasty, but obviously back the redraft here, drive his value down, redraft, and make him a fun person to take. Because if you're taking a guy that you have, we'll just say some concerns about in the early second, it's pretty nerve-wracking. But if he gets pushed down more to that 2-3 turn, then you feel a little bit better about that. So I guess I'll say fact, but just because it's Anthony Lynn. Otherwise, I've got nothing I'm basing that on.
Yeah, and it's incredibly frustrating. I mean, Anthony Lynn and this new coaching regime didn't draft DeAndre Swift. He's obviously a great talent in the NFL, but it is concerning. But Anthony Lynn also did coach Danny Woodhead and Austin Eckler in what probably would be considered his B role, and they were always fantasy relevant. Mm-hmm. What scares me about DeAndre Swift being the pass catching back is I remember the touchdown he dropped. That cost me a lot of money last year.
Cost you a lot of money, cost a lot of people a lot of money, literally cost the Lions the game. Like there are plays where it's like, oh my God, this play cost this team the game. Like, no, that like in every sense of the word is the play that cost the Lions the game last year. For those who don't remember, it was, I think, a 4th down, right? So yeah. It was either a 4th down or the last play of the game. I don't remember which, with like 15 seconds left, and he dropped a wide open pass in the end zone.
And he had it. Oh.
Yeah, it was sad. You always hate to see that happen to a guy who can kind of destroy his confidence. But all right, Antonio Gibson. I did see this quote earlier today. I figured that if you were grabbing some fact or fiction, this would get thrown in there. Ron Rivera says, "I expect he can make a big jump in this upcoming season." Dalton, what do you think here? Fact or fiction?
Well, first, I really put this on there because we both ranked him so similarly. We didn't get to talk about him last week, and I love the guy. I'm going to call it fact. Ron Rivera obviously coached a CMC-led offense where he really let one guy take over the backfield. And when Gibson came into the league last year, we all thought he was going to be the scat back. Turned out J.D. McKissick stole that role from him, and Gibson was the 1 and 2 down runner. We know he has the skills to be the passing down back. And
he was basically a hybrid receiver running back in college, like all of those Memphis guys apparently are.
Yeah, Gainwell to him to everybody else to come out of Memphis. But with Captain Checkdown and Alex Smith gone, the hope is that they expand their passing game and his maybe more complicated route tree outside of J.D. McKissick becomes more interesting. I know it's just coach speak, but Antonio Gibson in his second year is somebody I'm really excited to see on the field.
I'm going to say fact that I think his role in the offense will take a step forward. So I guess I'm going to cheat here, but I'm going to say fiction that I think he's going to take a big jump forward fantasy-wise. It'll be a step forward, and I don't have the stats in front of me. I think I had him last week, but not this week. His touchdown percentage last year was like insane for a guy on his few carries. Again, I don't have it in front of me, but he rushed for a lot of touchdowns. And as someone who had Gibson in a league last year, especially early in the season, it was like you were praying for the touchdown. You were praying that he was the one in the game and not any of their other terrible running backs on the 1 yard line like they would sometimes do to get the touchdown. So that's my one concern with him. But I do think just as far as his role goes, I think he was already on the way to doing that last year at the end of the season before the toe injury. He was kind of turning into the true workhorse back who I think they were slowly integrating into the passing game. And you're right. I'd expect McKissick, a lot of times those scat backs that, with Eckler being kind of the exception, they don't usually do that multiple years in a row. That's a tough thing to repeat.
Yeah, absolutely. And that toe injury really cost him when he was getting hit a full down rolling. Mm-hmm. And I did see today that he's still dealing with it a little bit in OTAs. So just hope, 2 months from now, that's all cleared up and he handles those duties all for one. We don't have to deal with J.D. McKissick anymore.
All right. Fact or fiction? Michael Carter, again, topic of conversation on this podcast. Jets beat reporter Connor Hughes says it won't be long before Michael Carter is the Jets lead back. Dalton, what do you think here? Fact or fiction?
I mean, I think this is fact, but I just feel like we all saw this one coming. I just wanted to put this on here because last week we did say, we don't want anybody in the Jets' backfield. And honestly, looking at our rankings and wide receiver, we don't want a Jet. But it is nice to see the reports coming out early, so maybe we can get a little clarity and hopefully have another back that we can trust for a little bit in fantasy.
Yeah, I'll say fact, but also, to what extent, right? Like, just because he's the starter, that's different. Just because he's the lead back, I'm not sold that he's going to be like the guy there this year, or if he is for this year, it's not going to be for a while because that's just not typically how it goes for rookie backs who are drafted in his range. Usually you've got to be a, outstanding prospect to come in right away and be a workhorse. So
like Trey Sermon.
Yes, exactly. Like Trey Sermon. So I'll say fact. I think he's going to be the lead back there sooner rather than later. But what that actually means, could it be 60-40 for a while? Yes, it could definitely be. Or, like 60-20-20 or, 60-30-10. It wouldn't surprise me if there's multiple guys involved and other guys more involved than we would like for quite some time.
Especially with it being a Shanahan coaching tree. For all we know, we could see LaMichael Pirine getting 30% of the snaps every week.
Yeah, I think we would have been excited about that last year, but I think we have now all seen enough of Pirine to not really care if he sees the field very much. But that's going to do it for Fact or Fiction here. We're going to hop right into receiver and quarterback rankings. You can watch us, if you're listening on the podcast, you can watch us every week or now every other week. As often as we do the podcast on YouTube, that is Half Point per podcast on YouTube. We'll link it in the show notes, so you can just go click on it there. Go subscribe to the channel. Again, we'll have mock drafts and stuff like that coming up soon where we make a little more use of the actual stream side of things. But still, come hang out, come watch us on the stream. And Dalton, let's get into some quarterback and receiver rankings. Let's start quarterback because I think we're going to have a pretty lengthy disagreement right off the top here. We've got Mahomes, we've got Jackson, one and two, which I'm a little surprised with the ranking of Lamar by a lot of people this year. I've seen him as low as 5. He had like a nightmare season last year and was still like top 10, like missed time. They had COVID hit them as hard as about any team in the league there for a while, and he's still a top 10 guy. Why are people so down on Lamar, comparatively speaking, at least?
Well, I think people just don't believe in his passing and still want to discount it. I mean, for what it's worth, Lamar Jackson has never thrown an interception in the red zone, which is always something you want to see.
In the regular season.
In the regular season. I apologize. You always correct me with that one. In addition to that, he is the best rusher we've ever seen at the quarterback position. I'll go ahead and crown him above Michael Vick on that one. And he has an offense that works in the exact favor you want him to play in. And then the team goes out and adds pass-catching weapons. I mean, they added Sammy Watkins. They drafted Rashad Bateman. They have Devin Duvernay, who there were good reports coming out of OTAs.
Yeah, well,
what that's worth.
Well, we'll see about that, but yes.
But they've given him everything he needs to succeed. And from week 10 on last year, I think he was the QB2. He was incredibly great at scoring, and he came and he brought it back around. And we've seen his upside, and it's the best fantasy quarterback season we've ever seen from anybody in the NFL. So I don't understand ranking him anybody but the league MVP and Patrick Mahomes.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking back. You might be thinking of a different range of time, but from week 10 to 16, he was QB 5, but like within, he was 1 point behind 4 and then 11 behind 3. So he was right there. And again, that's picking back up off of what had been just a nightmare of a season for them, COVID-wise and just kind of performance-wise there for a while. So, yeah, I think this is like a classic what have you done for me lately rank by anybody who's ranking him lower than, I'll say, 3rd. You can make the argument for him to be, 2 or 3, whether it's Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, or in your case, Dak Prescott being in that top 3 or 4, but I think he's at least top 3. I just wanted to ask about that because we had some major disagreements on him last year. We both have him at 2. I just looked at rankings today where I saw him as lower, as 5 and 4 and a lot. So thought it was worth the moment here. But here is where things get interesting. Number 3, I have Kyler Murray. Not a very hot take. Number 3 for you, which again, it's not that hot of a take based on where I think he's ranked by a lot of people. To me, it's a hot take. Dak Prescott, number 3. I will cede the floor to you first to lay out the case for Dak at number 3.
Well, and first, just let me say before we get too into it, I have Kyler Murray right next to him at the 4 spot. But I think that Dak Prescott, part of this ranking choice as the 3rd overall quarterback is that I want as much of him as I can get because he's not being drafted around that area. So ranking him higher means I'm going to end up with more of him in any redraft leagues I do. But last season in his 5 games, if we even count the game he got injured, he averaged, I think it's 27.3 fantasy points a game. That might be Lamar Jackson's number.
I think it was like 20. It was like 26 something. So you're in the ballpark, yeah.
Yeah, 26.9, which is second only in the history of fantasy to 27.3, which was Lamar Jackson's number, his MVP season. So he was on a tear to be what was probably going to be the best scoring quarterback performance or second best scoring quarterback performance in the history of fantasy football. Now, that's definitely the ceiling of his range of outcomes, but I love that he comes into an offense that returns 3 offensive linemen who ended up getting injured that season. And they're 3 very talented linemen. It's Tyron Smith, Lyle Collins, and Zach Martin. Then I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb, and I don't see how, he's at least the second best receiver in that draft class behind Justin Jefferson. One of the most talented. Amari Cooper is probably a top 5 route runner in the NFL. And Michael Gallup is the most overqualified 3rd wide receiver in the NFL at this time, maybe only behind Antonio Brown. So it's just an incredibly talented offense. And Dak Prescott has the dual threat functionality you want. I mean, there is going to be a little bit of concern from me if he's going to run a lot with what happened to his foot and that gruesome injury.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that if you get – not to get too grotesque here, but if you get your foot bent like that, it's just going to happen no matter what. So,
yeah. And then the last thing, his 3 and 4 years ago, his QB performances were 9 and 10, which is nothing special, nothing to brag about. But since Kellen Moore took over the play calling, they've gone through an air raid attack. They've been more than willing to, air it out and throw the ball as much as they can. And I don't see on paper where this defense improves and Dak Prescott's going to be the one having to dig them out of games. I mean, their draft capital in Micah Parsons, I think the linebacking position is like the running back position on defense. It's not going to severely influence the game. If they would have gotten a Surtain or something else, that might have influenced this decision a little differently. But just all in all, I think Dak Prescott has kind of the highest range of outcomes. He can definitely be a QB1, and I don't think his floor really exceeds the QB 10 at the lowest.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I told you right before we jumped on, I can understand ranking him ahead of, even though, again, I have Dak at 8, but basically I'll say 4 through 9, we're all really close. And that's Josh Allen 4, Aaron Rodgers 5, Russell Wilson 6, Justin Herbert 7, and then Dak 8. But here's what I cannot, under any circumstance, defend is ranking him ahead of Kyler Murray, who I know it's only 1 spot for you, but it's still 1 spot. And I think Kyler, I have him at 3, and I just can't bring myself to make that argument to get there for Dak being ahead of Kyler. So on Dak first, and then I'll get back to Kyler. You said he was QB, whatever, 9 and 10. I have 6 and 10. I think that's just a product of looking at weeks 1 through 16 versus maybe weeks 1 through 17. Top 10 quarterback. Those 2 years, he was QB3 in 2019. Again, you said it. He was basically at 26 points per game in the 4 full games he played last year. Again, we've talked about this, so people know where I stand. It wasn't because he was playing great football. His team was 1 and 3, and he was part of the reason, along with Zeke fumbles, just other inexplicable turnovers. The Cowboys were digging themselves crazy holes on a week in, week out basis. Everybody remembers the game that they won in that 1-3 start against the Falcons, where it was like the Falcons lost a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl, and somehow that Cowboys game was like almost as improbable of a win for the Falcons opponent. That's how bad it was. So there's that. I just don't think that model of dig a hole, dig yourself out of it, ride in same volume it can be a top 5 model for sure, but I don't think that's a sustainable thing. Now, obviously, I have him at 8, so I think he's very good and going to have a very good season. But I just have a little hesitation ranking him ahead of guys who I just think are better, in Herbert, Wilson, and especially Rodgers, Josh Allen, and Kyler Murray. But here's the real thing on Dak. So his first 4 games last year, so take out the injury game where he played basically one half, he was averaging 50 pass attempts per game. So for anybody who, and I know you're not saying this, but for anybody who wants to take what he did just from a fantasy stats perspective in those first 4 games and just extrapolate it over 16 games and just say, oh, well, he was going to be QB1 last year. He's for sure, QB1, QB2, whatever. That would have shattered the NFL record for passing attempts if he did that over a 16-game pace. He was on pace for 804 pass attempts. Did you know the NFL record is like 80 passes less than that? And then the number below that is only like 30, is a full 30 below that. So he was on pace to attempt 80 more passes than Matthew Stafford's, which it's funny that he has the record of all people, pass attempts in 2012. So I just think the volume was just so ridiculously insane in those first 4 games. And I like Dak, but I just don't think he has that same upside in a more normal football situation that you think he does. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that with the extreme amount of passing, there was an incredible amount of inefficiency in that. And that with the weapons he has, a decreased volume does not necessarily mean he's going to be a decrease in points. With Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, you have yak monsters, and Michael Gallup is a down-the-field threat every day. So he doesn't need to have 50 pass attempts a game to score at that rate.
To score at that rate, yeah, he does. To score at the rate he was scoring, 20 to almost have the all-time record.
Well, to score at a rate that qualifies him being over Kyler Murray is what I'm saying. And my other point on that is I think there's kind of insane metrics on both sides. Last season, Kyler Murray rushed for 133 times, and he would have likely rushed a lot more if it wasn't for the Week 10 injury. I mean, going into Week 10, he only had 5 games under single-digit rushes, and I don't know how sustainable that is as a coach. And I want to bet on a better passer than I do on a better rusher. And in this circumstance, I think the only rusher that I want to really invest my money in when it comes to fantasy football is Lamar Jackson, not Kyler Murray.
Well, but rushing is like the cheat code for quarterbacks. And so, okay, I'll go to Kyler Murray here now. He got hurt. It was week 9 actually against the Dolphins. And then week 8 was his bye. So basically weeks 1 through 7, he's healthy. The Cardinals are 5-2. They finish 8-8. He limps to the finish line a little bit, just like the team after the shoulder injury. If we're talking about on pace, he averaged 28 points per game in weeks 1 through 7 last year, and you mentioned it on the strength of the rushing, a lot of it for sure. But I just think if Lamar Jackson is the best runner of all time at the quarterback position, Kyler is like right there at number 2 with Michael Vick, maybe 3, depending on how you want to rank them. He's just that good and is that quick. I mean, how many times did he just make guys look absolutely foolish because he accelerated past them? So I just think he's gonna always put up big rushing numbers until he falls off as far as that goes. I think there's that, but again, he scores 387 points last year, QB1, and that's with playing half the season hurt. Dak's most ever scored is 319. So his best season has pretty drastically outperformed Dak's best season. And I still think Kyler has more room for improvement within his game than Dak does, just as a football player. I think he's got more upside as a football player that is still untapped than Dak does, because I'm not ready to give up on him as a passer yet. He's still only in year 3, and still still pretty much learning how to play quarterback in the NFL, quite frankly. And I totally think he has a 1,000-yard rushing season in him. I think he would have done that last year if he didn't get hurt. So I just think the upside is higher and the floor with the rushing is also higher.
See, and I think that's where our disagreement boils down to. I mean, first, Dak's first 3 seasons were with an NFL head coach who I think does not optimize talent at all in Jason Garrett. And his next 2 years, one, I think I have it as QB2 and your QB3 performance was with the first year of Kellen Moore and significantly changed how Dak played the game of football and really helped reinvigorate that offense into a new style of play calling. And secondly, I know Kyler Murray was running a lot, but he's been on record saying he doesn't want to run a lot. They made the addition of Rodney Hudson. I'm not going to predict that he doesn't run a lot this season because I think that's a stupid prediction. But I could see Cliff Kingsbury in that offense attempting to dial back and trying to turn him into a passer, which is probably better for the longevity of that franchise, but not the best for his fantasy production. And that's kind of where my difference making is I'm betting on them making a smart decision. And I think right now with the weapons that Dak is the better passer and that his offense gives him a better ceiling at using his passing for good fantasy output.
All right, we will see. I'm gonna say the guy with the higher ceiling is the guy who has scored more points in one season. But I can definitely understand the Dak argument. I just can't quite get there with him. The last thing I'll say on that, I guess, is is it a coincidence, or I'm not sure if it's a coincidence. I'm not sure, but the Cowboys' best seasons with Dak at quarterback have been when they've leaned more on the rushing game. Now, I'm not saying they're going to lean on the rushing game because they've got so many weapons to throw to, but I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure you can just bake in 45 passes a game for Dak or anything like that. I think you're going to get a lot of Zeke, a lot of Tony Pollard too. So there is that little factor, and just the rushing touchdowns with Dak are a lot harder to predict than with Kyler, because Kyler, it's like designed runs and stuff like that in the red zone, whereas Dak, it's like he'll scramble here or there, and that's just impossible to predict on a year in year out basis. But he has been productive in that way a lot.
Yeah, and I won't disagree with you on that. That the designed runs do give Kyler a definite plus, but I think Dak is a better passer, and that gives him an edge in that sense.
We'll see. This could be another interesting bet as the season rolls around in a couple months, because I feel pretty good about Kyler. I actually moved him up to 3 from 4 ahead of Josh Allen, just prepping for this show. Prepping for this show and looking at some of his stuff from last year. But probably enough on this topic. So Dalton, I already mentioned my 4 through 8. Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Herbert, and Dak. Looking over at yours, you've got Kyler at 4, Josh Allen 5, Tom Brady at 6, Russell Wilson 7, Herbert at 8. The only thing that really stands out to me there, well, 2 things, I guess, is Tom Brady, but it's not that much higher than mine. And I think we can all kind of figure out why Brady would be ranked pretty high, right? Like last year, their offense was kind of a mess for the first 10 weeks of the season. There was a lot of getting used to on both sides between Brady and Arians, and then the weapons. Is that really it, Dalton? You just think they're going to hit the ground running this year, and that offense is going to have a monster season?
Yeah, well, and I think week 10, week 11, I keep picking 10, and I think it's just a crutch. But there was a week going forward where Brady was 22-4 with a pass rate, and he was just doing much better. And it was obvious that he figured out Arians' offense, and it just took time because there was no OTAs. They didn't have the ability to work together with the COVID season. And Tom Brady really got it together as a player. And I am willing to bet on, again, a guy with established weapons. That entire team is back. They're going to be a very good team. I get the Tom Brady age model does play too well, but when you are throwing to Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Antonio Brown, Scotty Miller, even as a 4th, Rob Gronkowski, and OJ Howard, you just have an incredibly talented receiving core. And Tom Brady,
well, honestly, and then you have I can't think of the kid's name, Taylor or something or other, or I can't think of his name, but you have the other kid who's there who actually made he only had 10 catches last year, but had one of the best catches of the season, if I remember right. So yes, they've got talent everywhere on that offense.
Yeah. And so that's really, I think if you've listened to the Fantasy Footballers episode, they talk about it. And that's part of where it comes from. If you're betting on these statue quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, the passes really come in on whether or not they're going to be very, very excellent and efficient in the pocket. And Tom Brady's done it in his career. So I'm just not going to bet against him, even though he's 40 odd years old.
It's interesting that I looked at the Cowboys receivers and then the Bucks receivers, and I think you're one spot higher on Lamb than me, but overall, I'm higher on the Cowboys receivers and the Bucks receivers than you are. But you're higher on both the quarterbacks. I'm not quite sure how we got. It's not like a big difference, but it's like a couple of spots at almost every different receiver.
Well, I was looking at that too, and you're higher on Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence than me. Yeah, I'm higher on both the pass catching cores for those two teams. Mm-hmm. And I thought that I saw both of those, and I thought that was funny.
Trevor Lawrence is easy to explain because I think there's maybe some rushing upside that you aren't accounting for. We can get to that in a minute. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure on the Burrow. Maybe I don't know. It's just kind of throwing darts, I guess. Who knows?
Yeah. But yeah, that's where my Tom Brady goes from, and I'm assuming that's why you have Rodgers at 5, kind of the same vein.
Yeah, why do you hate Aaron Rodgers, the reigning MVP down at QB9?
If I were God, and the Green Bay Packers should be the model for regression because that entire team has been due for it. But last season he had a 9.1% touchdown rate. That was higher than his 2012 MVP season. And I just do not understand how he can do it again. It's a very
he's Aaron Rodgers. That's how he can do it.
I know, but it's a very limited. That's betting on Devontae Adams to get 20 touchdowns.
I know, but you know how it goes. You can talk about regression and be right, except when it comes to the great players. That's a very dangerous game to play with the great players, with the Mahomes, with the Rodgers, with Lamar, with Tyreek Hill. You know, with guys like that.
And the last part that's baked into this is if I'm drafting today, I don't really know if I want to draft Aaron Rodgers, not knowing where he's going to be, especially with him probably being worth a 6th, 7th round pick, maybe higher. I'm not sure what his ADP is. I don't know if he's going to play football. I just don't know if he's going to play next year, if he's going to sit out. And so that's why I mean, he's still in my top 12, but I have Wilson and Herbert above him because I know they're going to play, and I think they can both have great seasons and equal his output.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking more as of these as initial ranks and not necessarily draft ranks at this time, because unless you're in Dynasty, you're probably not drafting right now or doing best ball. But okay, looking down the list here, we've both got Burrow 10. I guess Trevor Lawrence is one that I saw you had highlighted and we mentioned. You have him 16, I have him 12. What are your concerns with Lawrence as a potential top 12 guy?
Urban Meyer. No, I know the rushing upside because he's rushed for 24 yards. And I think what everybody sets as the arbitrary cap for being a dual threat quarterback in the NFL is 25 yards. So Lawrence is basically there. But I looked back at historical performances, and Justin Fields is the best rookie year quarterback performance, and second is Andrew Luck. And they were QB, I think, 8 and 10. If you
no, not Justin Fields is this year's class. Who are you talking about?
I'm sorry, Andrew Luck.
Andrew Luck and who else though?
Justin Herbert.
Herbert.
Yeah,
okay.
Were two of the best performances. So I'm just being risk averse right now. I just want to see what's going on. I haven't dug into how good the offensive line is. I want to see if he's going to have his protections because he's a great thrower in his intermediate routes. And if he has those time, I'm probably going to move him up. I want to see a little bit about how Urban Meyer wants to run the offense since he's such an unknown in the NFL. So really it's a placeholder rank. I think that out of all the rookie quarterbacks, Lawrence will probably get my top rank, and he does on this list. But I just saw the ceiling of a rookie quarterback in the NFL is QB 8. And with my introduction to my rankings, I was going to put him lower because that's a tough ceiling to do what Justin Herbert did last season with 31 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess my two reasons for putting Lawrence clear up here at number 12 would be number one, he's really good. Everyone's been saying he's this generational guy for, since he was 19, basically. So let's see it. He's got pretty good weapons. The O-line, yeah, I don't know how great or not great the O-line is, but we like Robinson. We like Etienne as a weapon, especially as a pass catcher. Chenault, and then, of course, DJ Chark. So he should be set up for success. Number 2, even though the yardage was down last year, even in the shortened year, he only averaged like 3 yards a carry. It was down around like 200 yards. But more importantly, he had 8 rushing touchdowns in like whatever how many games they played, 8 or 9 games. And then he had 9 the year before that. I think he has a chance to kind of be that Josh Allen, Cam Newton, like type of guy inside the 5 or in those short yardage situations. And at 6'6", 220, I mean, he's got the size to do that for sure. So I think he's got maybe some touchdown upside as a rusher, even more than just yardage upside as a rusher.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. And again, the ranking is really I'm putting him below guys who have done a proven commodity for me, and I kind of enjoy, if I'm taking a later round quarterback, the upside of Trevor Lawrence. But if I'm talking about finishes, he has a more varied range of outcomes.
No doubt. No doubt. The guys behind him are all of like the streamer types, right? Like the Matt Ryan, Tannehill, Baker Mayfield, that tier of guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my ranks, at least.
And if I were to make tiers, which I'm finishing up my running back tiers, and I'll probably move on to quarterback, he's probably going to be in a different tier when it comes to it because he has a higher upside. I mean, I guess Matt Ryan has a high upside, but then some other guys like Baker, Tua, those guys don't have any upside. We know what their ceiling is, and it's 20.
I'm actually not sure that Tua doesn't have any upside. I think we still widely don't know what Tua's upside or downside is.
Yeah, well, that may be the case too. I was just cherry picking names, but
Sure.
I think Lawrence's upside is much higher. And you didn't even mention his best receiver and Marvin Jones on that team. I mean,
yeah, Marvin Jones will have 3 really great games to make himself the wide receiver like 29 for the 80th straight season.
yeah, exactly. So the one guy that I think you and me are probably the absolutely lowest on consensus of anybody I've seen is Jalen Hurts. I have him at 13 and you have him at 16. I mean, he's been profiled as that Konami code dual threat rusher, that wins you fantasy leagues and is this year's probably favorite late round darling. Do you want to give me your reasoning for him being all the way down at 16?
Well, I mean, number 1, I think he's going to be the starting quarterback, but like we do not know like 100% sure that he is the starting quarterback, which you can say new coach, you can say a lot of things, but if he was a very good to great quarterback or a very good to great young quarterback in the making, like that wouldn't even be a conversation, right? So I think just the fact that you have the coaches that they're not willing to just 100% commit to him right off the bat kind of tells you what you need to know about where he is as a player and as a quarterback right now. I think he's still very largely unproven, especially as a passer. I have some major concerns. He did have some bright spots last year, but also he had some games where if you were watching it, he left a lot out there on the field as far as missing some throws. Now he has better weapons this year with Devontae Smith, hopefully a healthy Dallas Goedert. Ertz probably not there. Hopefully we get a little Jalen Reagor post-hype this year. I know everyone was excited about him last year, but I don't know. I think talk about low floors. I think he, out of like anybody in this top 20 outside of like Daniel Jones in my top 20, I think those 2 are the lowest floors in my top 20.
Well, so I actually think when I started my rankings, I had him at 8 above Justin Herbert and Aaron Rodgers. And then I did a little digging, and I was telling you this. Context Matters, Dwayne McFarland on Twitter tweeted out rookies to post a sub 67% completion percentage in the NFL. And I'll give you the list. It's Josh Allen. So there's one. Deshaun Kaiser, Blaine Gabbert, Christian Ponder, Mark Sanchez, Josh Freeman, Matt Leinart, Vince Young, Andrew Walter, and Jalen Hurts, and then Matthew Stafford. So you have 2 hits and 9 people who just never turned out to be anything of significance in the NFL. And some of those guys, including Deshaun Kaiser, were people who could run the ball effectively. And I think what we saw from Jalen Hurts is he just didn't have any tape on him. And when you don't have tape on a rushing quarterback, that quarterback can really take off.
Yeah, because and especially they completely revamped their offense from what it was with Wentz to what it needed to be with Hurts because of his skill set and because of their offensive line and just the lack of time in the pocket for any quarterback last year there.
So I know we don't have either of them ranked, but between Fields, Hurts, and Lance, would you rank Fields and Lance ahead of Hurts if we knew they were starting tomorrow?
Yeah, I think so. Just because I'm a lot more sold on them as quarterback prospects than Jalen Hurts. What about
I'm
you?
I'm with you on that actually as well. Also, I've done a little bit of research into it, not enough, but I don't really think Nick Sirianni is going to be a good head coach for the Eagles. But we'll find out. I don't like the way he ran the offense in Indianapolis, giving Naheem Hines entire quarters instead of Jonathan Taylor is part of that. But I am not confident that they're going to utilize the offense the way Hurts needs it to be effective.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to follow. I'm just hoping that all is good enough in Philly to make Devontae Smith a fun fantasy player this year, because that kid is a lot of fun. And speaking of Devontae Smith, on to wide receiver and Dalton. I've got a question right off the top here. We both have Tyreek Hill 1, but Stephon Diggs with a surprise number 2 on your list. I have him 4, so it's not like we're much different, but I think that's the highest I've seen Diggs ranked by anybody.
Yeah, I'm betting on so first of all, I ranked Allen lower than I did last year. I think we saw Allen's ceiling. I don't think we saw Diggs' ceiling. John Brown took away some of the work he was getting. I don't think Emmanuel Sanders is as talented at this point in his career as John Brown, it will be told. But Diggs and Allen just had an incredible rapport, and I don't think it's going anywhere. Obviously, the big, name left out at number 2 here is Devontae Adams. There's nothing there but the Aaron Rodgers uncertainty, and I just don't want to deal with it if I'm drafting today. Adams, when he had to deal with Brett Hundley, I think 2 seasons ago, was still a top 12 wide receiver. He's still very talented, but he's not going to get 20 touchdowns from anybody not named Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and I've got Adams number 2 right now. But again, obviously extremely subject to change if anything were to happen with Rodgers. But my one slight ding of Diggs compared to Devontae Adams at 2 and then DeAndre Hopkins at 3, who you also have at 3, is that we just see those guys do it for longer, more consistently than Diggs. Now Diggs has had good years, but he's not like been a year in year out top 5 kind of guy like these guys have been. So at the top, you're kind of nitpicking, and I'm trying to find the volume here. Let me get to it. I think I've almost got it. Diggs had, let's see, usage. He was up around a 30% target share last year, which is just massive. So while I love Diggs, I think I have to acknowledge that that's at least like the teeniest little concern for me is that maybe that drops off. I know John Brown is gone. Taylor Gabriel is back, and he showed some flash at the end of last season. Cole Beasley still around, Emmanuel Sanders. And then, we'll see if they get back, not clearly like all the way back, but we'll see if they go a little bit further back to the run as opposed to last year where it was like historical how much they pass the ball compared to running. So I think those are all little things that just bring Diggs down to 4 instead of 2 for me.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm the first to admit, because I was a huge Bills, bell ringer last offseason. That's probably the ceiling of that team. I mean, they don't get much better than that. The concern I have about Hopkins, and it's that Cliff Kingsbury runs him in the stupidest route tree ever, and DeAndre Hopkins is just better than the route tree he's given, and he has a great connection. He wins every ball. I think he's a better player than Stephon Diggs. It's probably minute at this point, but they're both great route runners. Hopkins probably wins better contested balls. If I'm splitting hairs, Zach Ertz is really rumored around this Buffalo Bills team. If Ertz ends up in Buffalo, I probably swap those two, because I think that has a considerable impact on his target share because it's so high.
Yeah, because and even if it's not that high, it is going to be higher than Dawson Knox or probably anybody else in Buffalo last season. So for sure, with you there. Splitting hairs the top, though. I think there's really no wrong answer for pretty much 1 through 5. AJ Brown at 5 for me, 4 for you. DK Metcalf 6. So you and I feel a little differently about Metcalf. Real quick, I'll just go. through these next couple. Calvin Ridley at 7 for me. Michael Thomas 8. Justin Jefferson 9. And Mike Evans 10. Your top 10. So you've got Devontae Adams at 6, like we've said. Jefferson at 7. Allen Robinson at 8, which is funny because we had a kind of a spirited conversation about Allen Robinson where I thought I was going to be higher on him than you coming into this. And then DK Metcalf 9, Michael Thomas 10. Dalton, I see you have Metcalf highlighted there. So what gives you pause about DK Metcalf? At least enough pause to not go top 8, to drop him a little bit.
Yeah, and again, I think the top 10 receivers probably you're happy with any of them as your wide receiver 1, including DK. It goes back down to the assumption of rational coaching and Pete Carroll not doing it. Second half of the season last year, DK didn't peer off, but he was not nearly the monster he was the first 8 games. I think it more drastically affected Tyler Lockett, who, when you remove his 50-point game, suddenly is no longer a top 10 wide receiver. But
yeah, and let me tell you, we've talked about his inconsistency before. It's one thing to look at the game log. It's almost more jarring to look at his target percentage by game because it's like 44, 11, 39, 5, like 38, 17. Like he was ridiculously up and down last year. And yeah, you're right. Metcalf did definitely tail off down the stretch.
And when you look at his receiving down the stretch, there are games where Russ threw it like 23 times and he gets 8 targets, and those are a good 8 targets. But when I'm ranking people and the skill level is really close, Allen Robinson getting 10 targets, DK getting 8, it's probably more valuable for A-Rob to get 8. Calvin Ridley getting more than DK, probably more valuable when Calvin Ridley gets more targets. And with Pete Carroll hammering that they want to go back to the run, they fired their OC, they've changed back to that in the second half of the season. I'm betting money that that's really going to happen. And 25 to 26 pass attempts a game and getting a 30% target share out of that is not as valuable as being in a high flying offense, even if you're very talented. And that's why he got dinged a few points.
Sure. I definitely get the concerns, kind of like how you think Dak's upside is higher than almost anybody at quarterback. I think Metcalf might have the highest upside of any receiver in the league. He is just such a freak and showed it on many occasions last year. I think if he is able to take even another step forward, which I'm not saying he is going to, but he could, he's got higher upside to me than like an Allen Robinson, even a Calvin Ridley, AJ Brown. It's debatable. I think though he's the highest upside of any of those guys to me. And I don't know. I know the situation. I know the coach. I know all of that, but he's got a great quarterback. He's a great player. It was good enough to be, I think, wide receiver 5. I've got that somewhere here. He was, wide receiver 5 last year, even with the struggles. And he's still so clearly on upswing as far as age and all of that as an NFL player. So room to grow. And I'm really, at the end of the day, just picking him to basically repeat last season's production.
Yeah, it just kills me because I had him higher at first, and then I dropped him a bit. When you see,
I had about like 2 or 3, and I was like, okay, I had to chill out a little bit.
It's just like I get the Rams game. He got 4 targets. Jalen Ramsey's a dog. He wins that. But then you play Arizona, he gets 5 targets. You play Washington, he gets 6 targets. It's like, how are you not scheming up more looks for your best player on offense? And that's my consideration. Maybe there were some injuries we don't know about, but. Yeah, that's where I have DK, and I think the guys above him I just feel more comfortable with, especially, on to Allen Robinson. 2 straight seasons of 150-plus targets is just absolutely incredible. Love the guy, and I'm penciling Calvin Ridley in at 5 just because I don't expect Julio Jones to be there.
Yeah, I think if Julio is gone, I'll probably move Ridley up at least 1 spot, maybe 2, but since it hasn't happened yet, I just haven't adjusted the ranks, especially, the Titans are one of the teams that are rumored to be in the lead. So it's like, okay, then I'd have to move. If I'm moving Ridley up, then I need to move AJ Brown down probably because that's where Julio might be going. So it's a whole thing where I'm just going to wait until it happens before I make those moves.
Yeah, there's only so many targets you can give when you throw 400 times a year. That's Ryan Tannehill.
All right, Michael Thomas, another one where I'm only 2 spots higher, but I see you'd like to talk about it. So, Dalton, what is your issue with Michael Thomas? I know you're just a Michael Thomas hater.
Actually, this goes okay. It's funny because today was like Slant Boy Day for Michael Thomas on Twitter.
Yeah,
and everybody got theirs in. I think
because Roto World had just the wonderful blurb about Jameis was bad on the slant route, so his last year as a starter. So not good for Michael Thomas, man. That's all he can do.
And I put him as yellow because I just want to talk about him because when I went through my rankings, I had him at 10. I was like, it's just too low. Mm-hmm. But then I was like, I don't know. I really know who I can put in front of him. I mean, we're one fantasy football season removed from him being the consensus wide receiver 1 in dynasty and redraft.
Yeah, and he had like an all-time season, most receptions in a year. So yeah, I mean, even at 8, it feels too low. And maybe it's a little bit, what have you done for me lately? Maybe it's a little bit, let's see him come back and prove it and be healthy, because he was dealing with the ankle literally from week 1 on last year. You had Mike. See, the slant boy thing to me has always been unfair. I know it's a funny and easy joke. After, was it Carlton Davis? Was he the one that said
he called him slant boy?
You've got Drew Brees playing with like -2 shoulders. Michael Thomas playing on one ankle, basically. So there were some other factors involved in that game specifically and down the stretch last season.
Well, and I think if Jameis Winston starts, I probably move Thomas up to at least 6, 5. But how concerned are you about a Taysom Hill-led Saints offense and Michael Thomas? Because I get that if we don't have Drew Brees, Michael Thomas's route tree becomes more diverse because there are more optional passes, but I don't think there would be anybody.
Jameis could actually throw it 30 yards down the field. And contrary to popular belief, Michael Thomas can actually do that.
But if you get Taysom Hill, I don't know if there's any route other than maybe the deep ball. And even then, last season they brought in Jameis for that deep ball. When
here's what I'll say. I think you're better off with Jameis probably, but how much worse off are you from a quarterback perspective going from Teddy Bridgewater to Taysom Hill, do you think? Like, how big a difference is that?
Well, I think the way the offenses are led, I think Teddy Bridgewater is just more accurate of a passer, but Taysom Hill gives you a more rushing upside, which, it inversely affects how many passes you throw. And so as from an offense perspective, probably not big, but from a fantasy perspective, I think there's a slight drop-off for the receivers.
Sure. So if there's even more than a slight drop off, like half of Michael Thomas's record-breaking season was with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. So it's not like he's had to have Drew Brees, who even with his injuries is obviously one of the smartest guys to ever do it at quarterback up until the very end. It's not like he's had to have that to be a super elite guy. So I think while I get the quarterback concern, and that is part of the reason why he's discounted at 8 compared to 2 or 1 or 3, I don't get having him much lower than that, because it's not like Teddy Bridgewater is some world beater, I guess. I'll put it that way. And the weapons don't look hardly any different. I mean, they've got a new young tight end, but it's basically still Kamara, Michael Thomas, and that's all you care about.
Well, we have people on Twitter saying 160 targets for A.J. Brown, but I mean, Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway, Adam Troutman, that's not a very competent receiving core that Michael Thomas has to compete with either if we want to get into the la-la land of 160-plus targets.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just easier to get excited about A.J. Brown because, number one, he is like a bowling ball and just kind of a more entertaining player to watch, at least at first glance. If you're watching like on film, the way Michael Thomas torches guys on routes is probably more entertaining than just about anything. But you've got that aspect and just the newness aspect of everybody wants to be the guy to say this guy's going to be the wide receiver 1 before he does it. And I think that's also just, you have to remember that when you're reading and listening to us, to anybody else, that it's a lot more fun to be right about the guy who hasn't done it before.
Yep. Than to call your shot and the shot have already been right. Yep. I agree with that.
Yep. All right. So as I said, Mike Evans at 10 for me. I thought it was funny that I am higher on him than you, but again, kind of splitting hairs. Keenan Allen at 11, still looking for who to talk about next. My mouse has been like dead. There we go. Allen Robinson, I got 12, so not a whole lot lower. You moved Cooper up from last I actually looked at this closely. Number 12, that's interesting. I have him at 16, so not much different. Okay, the one I did want to talk about is Terry McLaurin. I love Terry. This is a pro Terry McLaurin podcast, but I think you're going to have to convince me that Terry is the wide receiver 11 over guys with better quarterbacks such as Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Those would kind of be the guys that I'd have in that conversation. I think I have Terry 17, so basically behind all of those guys I just listed.
Okay, so the list I'm looking at, you have him at 15, but either.
Yep, 15. Got to scroll over a little.
Okay, either way, this part of this is Fitzmagic season, and Ryan Fitzpatrick has just been an absolute quarterback god when it comes to producing top 12 wide receiver seasons, from Eric Decker and Demaryius Thomas to he made us think Devontae Parker was good for a season. We're back to realizing our errors in that one, but this is another one of those wide receivers where my initial take and my current take are probably going to change a little bit, because I think the Washington football team defense significantly hurts us from getting Ryan Fitzpatrick YOLOing the ball 80 yards downfield to Terry McLaurin, which is what I initially envisioned when I made this rank.
Are we sure? I think that's just kind of what Fitzpatrick does, which is part of my concern. I love Terry. I think if you're on a different team, like if he were playing for the Chargers, I'd probably have him 11, right? Like I'd have him where I have Keenan Allen. I think he is that awesome. But I mean, I just have some quarterback concerns. I know Fitzpatrick has produced very good receivers, and I've actually given Terry a small bump from where he finished last year. He was 19th last year, weeks 1 through 16. I have him 15, so even still taking a step forward. But the thing about Fitzpatrick is he has not started all 16 games. It's been like 5 years. He's only done it 3 times. I mean, there's a reason why the guys played on, and I went back and looked, 8 teams, only started all 16 games 3 times, has started less than 8 games 3 of the past 4 years. I mean, it's just, he seems to run his course pretty quickly in just about any situation that he's in. We'll see how long he lasts there. Not saying it's like a sure thing he's not going to get a good portion of the season, but there's just a little bit of it. There's instability at his quarterback, where there is not with really anybody else that in that range, except for Kenny Galladay for me.
Yeah, and I would say the other part of it is that I would expect the quarterback play no matter what to be better. Dwayne Haskins was probably the worst, and then Alex Smith was the other quarterback throwing balls to him, and there just really was it. Probably one of the, and then Brandon Allen. I mean, 3 of the worst quarterbacks you could think of in the NFL at that time. No disrespect to Alex Smith, but it just didn't look good. And Terry McLaurin was still getting things done. I mean, he had the week where he was shadowed by Marlon Humphrey, one of the best corners in the NFL, and was getting the ball thrown to him by, I think it was Haskins week. And he still ended up as a top 12 wide receiver. I'm a believer that between Fitzpatrick and even Taylor Heinicke, if he shows off like he did against the Bucs in the playoffs, you could have a very good quarterbacking crew kind of pushing him ahead. And this is one of the rare times where I'm valuing talent over situation. I just think Terry McLaurin's so good, he should be there.
Mm-hmm. So I look at a guy like Chris Godwin, who I have 13, so I have 2 spots ahead of McLaurin, where he was basically consensus wide receiver 5, wide receiver 4, maybe 6, somewhere in that range by just about everybody last year. I know they add Antonio Brown. I know he only played like what felt like 7 or 8 like fully healthy games. But even with as up and down as it was for their team and for him specifically, he was on a 87 reception pace for over 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns in his 12 complete games. And that's even including like he left early at least twice with different injuries and was playing with a broken finger when he came back. So I just think like if you're comparing McLaurin to other guys in that range, like I think Godwin's being a little underrated because he had an up and down and rough season last year. And a lot of the reasons why you have a lot of faith in Brady this year, I have that same kind of faith in Chris Godwin.
Well, and I think part of my ranking for the Bucks receivers is in my top 60. I have Brown scratching it and you don't. And I think I'm just, if we were to stat it out and really look at the numbers, I probably am detracting more from those two receivers because of Brown's full season being there. Not to say that they're not really great athletes or any of that. But, going back to how just horrible it's been to rank wide receivers, I would say, if I'm looking at my ranks going from 11 to 22, which is Robert Woods, I would say any of those guys could, I'd say anywhere from Kenny Golladay to Terry. I could interchange 11 and 21 and be like, that's fine with me.
For sure. So a couple of other guys in the top 20 range to talk about. Then we can move on to more of the fringe, flex guys to close it out here. So to round out my top 20, Kenny Golladay, 16, Julio Jones, placeholder at 17. He'll move up or down depending on where he goes, most likely up. But just a placeholder. CeeDee Lamb, 18. Did you consider putting him closer to Cooper or even ranked higher than Cooper? This goes back to you want to call it before it happens. I really wanted to call this before it happens. I just couldn't quite get myself to do it.
Let me first say, I think Amari Cooper gets a very unfair reputation of giving up in games and all of that. He has 6 of his 7 seasons. He's gone over 1,000 yards, and Mike Evans gets all the hubbub about being the only receiver to do it 7 times. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, with probably worse quarterbacks for most of his career, Amari Cooper almost did it. He's a great talent. No, but I wanted to put them right next to each other. In the very short 5-game stretch last year, they were wide receiver 10 and 11. I mean, they were back-to-back in Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. But looking at ADP, some people are ranking CeeDee Lamb above Amari Cooper, and I think it's just easier for me to take Amari Cooper, just knowing what his value is. But I love both the guys. They're both very, very talented.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I could definitely hear both sides of the argument. So looking at your 15 through 20, you've got Julio at 15, Godwin 16, CeeDee Lamb 18, CeeDee Lamb 17, DJ Moore 18, Deontay Johnson 19, Odell 20. Just because you are 4 spots higher than me on Odell, I want you to talk about him because you've been a big anti-Odell guy. So it's funny that you're the flag carrier for Odell Beckham this year.
Yeah, I have to go back and delete all of the VODs from last year. It just starts with what Baker became after the bye in the Kevin Stefanski offense. And if I'm buying any part of Baker breakout, it's going to be that he became a very good deep passer. I wrote about it last year. And I think that if he's going to be that deep passer again, Odell Beckham Jr. might have the best quarterback of his career throwing to him, which is really sad for Odell. But if those things work and Odell is a specter of talent, and I think he still has a lot of talent left, he would suddenly catapult himself into a top 12, wide receiver immediately. So I'm putting him in the top 20 because he's still very good. The injury is the only thing that really keeps him down. And I am a believer in Kevin Stefanski, and he implemented his offense so well last year in Cleveland that I'm going to bet that they repeat it. The offensive line is really what I'm watching for. If they can protect Baker, then Odell becomes a very, very valuable fantasy asset.
Mm-hmm. My hesitation with Odell, I have him at 24. It's not much lower, basically the same in the grand scheme of things. But the reason why he's not more like a 14 to 15 type of range is, the further he gets away from his best seasons, the harder it gets to rank him in the top 15, top 20 for me. And then also just I talked about this last week, but I'm being pretty conservative with a lot of the guys coming off injury, like Cortland Sutton. I've got a good bit lower than I think I otherwise would if he wasn't before last year. If he wasn't coming off a torn ACL like Odell. So just those guys, the major injuries, I'm probably dinging them a little bit more than maybe the average person. So there is also that.
Yeah, and really what it came down to me in this range is there's not a wide receiver more talented. I mean, maybe Jamar Chase, we don't know yet. Mm-hmm. That you can get, and the offense works on play action verticality, which is what Odell was really good at when he was at his best. And so I think those are really good fits for him. But I thought it was weird when I ranked him that high, and I was like, oh, this is a big change from last year.
Yeah, well, I had him at 8 last year, so there's quite a few changes. Quite a few changes there. Okay, 20 through 30. Again, this is where it really gets like you could put these guys in almost any order, and it's hard to really complain. The one thing that jumps out to me right away before I just read through the ranks, I have Adam Thielen 21, and I felt like I was being low. You have him at 28, so you hate old guys when it comes to receivers, at least.
The guy scored like 10 touchdowns on like 13 red zone targets last year.
That's just what he does, though. He's done that for like 3 straight years. I know it's frustrating, but it's just what he does.
And he walks up to the red zone, and suddenly he's open when they throw the ball. You're like, I don't know when he got open or how he got open.
Was it against the Cowboys? He had a catch either last year or the year before. He has some ridiculous like corner of the end zone catches. He's an awesome player.
But my real take on this is last year, him and Justin Jefferson were top 24 in an offense that historically you wouldn't have bet money on to be a big passing offense. And they were because they had a bad defense. Mike Zimmer went out and spent a ton of money on defense because he is a defensive-minded coach. He's a coach who likes to get out and run the ball. I just do not see Kirk Cousins throwing. I think he was like the 9th or 10th highest in pass attempts last season. I don't see them repeating that, and that just hurts value somewhere, and I can't get past taking Justin Jefferson down in my ranks. So Adam Thielen was the prime loss. And then I also anticipate Irv Smith taking up a better red zone role, hopefully, because we need some good tight ends.
Yeah.
And those are the two things. I really love Adam Thielen as a player. I think last year you and me were both really, really above ADP on him, and we hit value on that. But this year I'm taking the age model. He's getting old. And I'm taking the regression, and I'm throwing him down a few spots.
I get it. No, and I'm not going to fight you too hard, but I just thought that was interesting. It's one of our biggest differences. The other one I would say is one of our biggest differences. I have to scroll to even double check where you have this guy ranked. Cooper Kupp. So you have Cooper Kupp 32. I have him 22. So I guess I'll explain my high rank first. So he's wide receiver 24 last year. We think he has a quarterback upgrade. In fact, I'm pretty sure he does. I sent you guys a nice little graph that I'm going to go back and reference here that Mina Kimes and Nate Trice inspired this graph by Sam Hoppin to be put together at 4for4 Fantasy Football. He's looking at EPA, expected points added, and all kinds of different percentages for quarterbacks. The biggest takeaway, and we've talked about this with Goff. If you look at Goff, his EPA when he's under pressure is negative 0.66. Now compare it to Stafford, negative 0.26. His EPA, let's see, I lost Goff. His EPA when he's scrambling is negative 0.1. Stafford is clear up at 0.74, which I think might be the highest in the NFL last season. So you've got a guy who the situation does not have to be perfect for he and his weapons to excel. Also, when you think of the Rams, I thought this was interesting. When you think of the Rams, you think of them as like, they live on the play action. Like they have these schemes where they get Goff these easy throws and play action, and that's how he wins. He was only a 0.03 EPA on play action. Stafford 0.23. So pretty much every sense of the word, Stafford is an upgrade. So that is partially what makes me feel pretty good about Cooper Kupp. And he's just, when he's been healthy, he's pretty much a 1,000-yard guy.
Yeah. So let me first say, when I looked at Cooper Kupp where I had him ranked, I wasn't comfortable with it. And I really hate that there's no conflict we can have in this wide receiver rankings because I'm so apathetic about some of these rankings. Mm-hmm. But I have decided that I am not as big of a believer as Matthew Stafford suddenly elevating this offense into a new tier. I think they'll be better than they were with Jared Goff, but I don't necessarily believe that he's going to be able to really take them to a great level. And
we also have a full season of Cam Akers, who everybody agrees is a top 12 running back. And, Henderson was good, but a full season of Akers, theoretically, you've got an upgrade at running back this year as well.
And really, because I could coin flip and put Robert Woods where Cooper Kupp is and flip the two of them. The difference for me is when you look at the target percentage that Matthew Stafford has out of guys out of the slot, it's like one of the lowest in the NFL. He just doesn't normally throw it, and that might be play calling in Detroit his entire career. And that might be the fact that he had Megatron on the outside.
Megatron and Kenny Galladay on the outside. So yeah. I think it's probably more that, right, where it's you just look at his personnel.
So the choice for me to rank Woods ahead of him and for a 10 set discrepancy was that I think Woods will probably run more outside routes and that Matthew Stafford is going to hit him on those, and that's going to be the point differential. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how effective Cooper Kupp's going to be out of the slot. And then I really am hoping for more Higbee shares and him getting some more work as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Woods at 20, so it's not like I've got him 2 spots ahead of Kupp. I think Woods is a slightly better player, more complete player. So I'm with you there, not with you on Kupp being down at 32, but just read off the 20 through 30. And I think there's 2 more guys that we should touch on before we go. So my 20 through 30, Robert Woods 20. Then we've got Adam Thielen, Cooper Kupp, Deontay Johnson, Odell Beckham, Brandon Ayuk, Tyler Lockett, Cortland Sutton, Jamar Chase, Chase Claypool, and DJ Chark. Now over to Dalton's ranks. He has Kenny Galladay 21, which I think is a little bit low, but we can talk about that another day. Robert Woods 22, DJ Chark 23, Jamar Chase 24, Tyler Lockett 25, Brandon Ayuk 26, Brandon Cooks 27, Adam Thielen 28, T. Higgins 29, and Robbie Anderson 30, which that'll also be another one to get to for another day because I think, a decent bit lower, have him 38. But do you want to talk about DJ Chark? I know you mentioned I was low on him earlier. Is there anything you want to talk about with him necessarily, or do you want me to talk about why I'm lower than you? Or I don't know what you want to do here.
We both loved him last year, and I just want to know why you turned your back on him.
Well, it's a little bit what have you done for me lately. He had a tough year last year. I know a lot of it was quarterback. He was banged up a lot, but also he kind of had some dud games where I know the quarterback was bad, but he kind of burned you a little bit if you have him in fantasy, even when he was healthy last year. So that kind of bad taste in my mouth might be part of it. Again, he kind of ended up at 30 just because he's the guy that ended up at 30, right? I think 25 through 30, especially looking at these ranks, even 24 through 30 for me, starting at Odell, going through Chark. It's so close between all those guys that he just kind of got ended up at 30. I like some of the other weapons there. They've added a little bit more around him. You do have the Trevor Lawrence uncertainty as far as in the passing game. Well, I do think Lawrence will have a big year. Just a lot of unknowns in the passing game as far as who's going to be the number one target. How are they going to scheme Shenault the ball? How are they going to work that? Shenault and ETN, that could theoretically be a very large part of their passing offense if they want it to be, or it could be Chark. I just have a couple more questions about what Urban Meyer is going to do coupled with situation than I do with maybe some of those other guys.
That's fair. I just, when he becomes a top 5 wide receiver this season, I'll be able to say I put my flag on him first.
I ranked him 23rd, so I totally called him top 5.
No, it was just funny because I remember you and I both really wanted a DJ Chark breakout season last year. Didn't get it.
Yep, absolutely. I'll take it this year too. Post hype is always good. Last guy, unless there's anybody else you want to talk about, Brandon Cooks. We are quite different as far as Brandon Cooks. He was not a guy I even considered in my top 30. Dalton, you have him 27.
Yeah, he's really good still. It's the first part. Second part, I don't think the Houston Texans as a team belong in the NFL right now from a basis of talent. But Brandon Cooks is the best player on the team, I think, by a mile. Maybe Laramie Tunsil, but considering what he helped do to that franchise, I'm going to knock him a few points. Tyrod Taylor 2 years ago when he played in the NFL was a middle of the range deep ball thrower. And then Davis Mills, one of the number one things that Matt Waldman said about him is he's a first read guy. So if either of those play, I think that Brandon Cooks still has some value. And I do not think there's going to be a single game where the Houston Texans aren't playing from behind and they're going to have to throw the ball. So I'm just confident that cream rises to the top. He's competing with Randall Cobb, Kiki QT, just nobody on that team that you want to worry about. And then Darren Fells is even gone, who was a big red zone target, and he has no Will Fuller to compete with. So I'm just confident that with such a lack of talent that he is going to be the one guy on that team who you will feel comfortable rostering. And he's just going so late in drafts that I wanted to put him above ADP because I want him on my team in a redraft league.
Yeah, so I've got him at 36. Number one factor is who is their quarterback. I think Tyrod stinks. The second round rookie, who knows, but it's a second round rookie, so I'm not like expecting much, especially with how bad their team is going to be around him, and the coaching we'll see, I guess. So you have all of that, and then just like I compare him to a guy like I have T. Higgins 32, and it's like I can't get Cooks above even him, much less like Deebo Samuel, DJ Chark, Chase Claypool, because I just think they all have similar upside, and I can just see so many more ways that it goes wrong for Brandon Cooks. Whether maybe the situation is just too bad, he just can't overcome it. Brandon Cooks is also always one concussion away from literally maybe being out of the NFL because he's had so many concussions. So I always bake in the injury risk with him, and then just the low week-to-week floor anyways, and then you have the low floor of the Texans, and all of that together gives me some concern about him as a top 30 guy.
Yeah, and really it comes down to no one else is going to get the ball, in my opinion. I think he's a good player, and I mean, he's probably, would you agree, he's a top 24 NFL talent?
Yeah, oh yeah, he's a very good player, and between he and Fuller, I was on the Brandon Cooks train last year, so I'm on record as liking him as a player, no doubt.
It is also funny. I mean, just the things we've said on this pod. I have Will Fuller four spots lower than Brandon Cooks, and you have Will Fuller above Brandon Cooks this year. Yeah, but I really believe that someone on that team is going to have to pass a lot, and someone's going to have to be the recipient of it. And even if there's 3 quarters of only 3 and outs, maybe the fourth quarter he gets 60 yards here and there and a touchdown here and there. And when you're getting that in the 9th, 10th round, that's pretty good value.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. But we're at an hour 16. There's more guys we could easily get to, but we will save some of those for team previews. Like why Dalton has Chase Claypool 39. I have him 29. Another big difference, but that is a conversation for another day. That is going to do it for Half Point Per Podcast. Johnny, before we get out of here, are the Mavericks going to win this game that tips off in like 10 minutes?
100%.
I hate to tell you, I think they're cooked.
I hate to tell you, they're going to win.
It would be like the most Clippers thing ever to look like completely unstoppable, do what no one thought they would, win games 3 and 4, and then just like lose game 5. I am actually like really concerned about Luka's health, though.
I will have a meltdown, but I am concerned about
Luka. Apparently couldn't even turn his head. Luka couldn't even turn his head to the left. It's like you kind of need to be able to turn your head.
Yeah,
it's kind of like
a
the
whole lot of
Trubisky thing.
Peripheral vision, so I'm a little concerned about that. But we've had a couple days, so Mavs win by 6.
Yeah, I'm taking Clips by like 15. I'm sorry. That's going to do it for episode 32 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. Come subscribe on YouTube at Half Point Per Podcast. Just search that on the YouTube search bar. Link is in the description as well. And the show obviously available anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, anywhere else. Leave us a 5-star review. Tweet us, comment on videos, you name it. We'll respond. We'll do any of that stuff. We will be back. I am not sure when we're going to be back weekly yet, either next week or the week after. We might go weekly, but it's coming up soon. The season is coming up soon, and it is an exciting time. Thank you guys for listening.
Good morning.